The stadium didn't feel like it was ready for it, like it hadn't quite caught its breath from the anthem before the madness began. 4 minutes. 4. That's all it took for Inter Miami to start writing themselves into a hole. Noah Allen, still waking up apparently, mistimes the moment, and Porto? They pounce. João Mario hits the deck, the ref points straight to the spot, and the inevitable video assistant referee confirmation just dragged out the dread. Samu Agehawa steps up, makes no mistake. 1-0. The kind of early goal that doesn't just punch you in the face, it looks you in the eye while it does it. And from there, the first half unfolded like a dream sequence where everything goes just slightly wrong. Luis Suarez had a chance, a left-footed shot, set up beautifully by Lionel Messi, threading a pass only he saw. But Claudio Ramos stood tall, or maybe it was Suarez who blinked. Either way, Inter Miami had their warning flare. But Porto, they didn't just sit back. No, they pressed. And they pressed like a team with an actual plan. Rodrigo Mora looked like he was inventing heat maps with every touch. Drifting left, popping up centrally, making defenders chase shadows. Fabio Vieira had one go wide. Alan Varela rattled the post like it owed him money. By minute 43, Miami were still gasping, holding on. Then came halftime. Merciful, like a breather during a drowning. And if you're asking whether Inter Miami deserved to be behind at the break, the answer isn't even the point. It felt like they weren't quite in it yet. Everything looked tentative. Even Messi's touches, while crisp, had that weird sense of isolation, as if no one was quite in his orbit. And what a strange feeling that is. You watch Lionel Messi on a pitch, and you start looking around, wondering why everyone else is playing a different sport. Still, the movement wasn't there. The rhythm was missing. It felt like watching an orchestra tune up for 45 minutes. Notes everywhere, but no song. Meanwhile, Porto weren't spectacular, but they were effective. They pressed with intensity, but it wasn't reckless. They forced mistakes in midfield, but didn't overcommit. They played with the kind of sharpness that suggested they didn't need to be spectacular. They just needed to be smart. And they were. First half? Porto's. But you could feel something shifting just before the whistle. Busquets started seeing more of the ball. Messi dropped deeper. Weigand pushed higher. The shape was not fixed, but less broken. It was still 1-0 at the half, but there was this undercurrent, like pressure building behind a dam. You know that feeling when you just know a game is about to tip? Well, it did. Right out of the tunnel, no warm-up act, no foreplay, Inter Miami smashed their way back into the narrative. 46th minute. Talasco Segovia. Boom. Like thunder with cleats on. And it wasn't just a goal. It was the kind of strike that makes you rethink your assumptions. He found the top right corner like he had a GPS chip in his laces. Credit to Marcelo Weigand for the assist. That cross was whipped like it had an agenda, and Segovia obliged like it owed him something. 1-1. Just like that. And you could feel it. The swagger came back, that weird weight that had been draped over Inter Miami's shoulders all through the first half just evaporated. Suddenly, Messi wasn't alone anymore. Suddenly, the midfield looked like it had a pulse. Suddenly, Porto were scrambling. Then, the 53rd. A foul in a dangerous spot. Rodrigo Mora, who had been otherwise tireless, clips Messi. Maybe he thought Messi wouldn't shoot from there. Maybe he thought this wasn't still that Messi. Rookie mistake. It was exactly that Messi. You know what's coming. The free kick, the pause, the breath, the left foot, top right corner. Claudio Ramos got there too late for even a regret. 2-1. Game flipped. Not just the scoreline, but the temperature, the body language, the narrative. Inter Miami didn't just come back, they started writing the second half, and from there, it got wild. Porto responded like a team who didn't take kindly to having their authority challenged. Shots started flying from everywhere. William Gomes came on and immediately decided to shoot on sight. Otavio joined the fray with that I will fix this myself energy. Agehawa had a couple moments, a header that had Ustari holding his breath, and another rocket that could have made a case for orbital travel. But Inter Miami didn't just retreat. They absorbed. They adapted. Jordi Alba came on like he was still 30 in Spanish. Fafa Picault showed up and nearly scored off a Messi header. Yes, you read that correctly. Messi assisted with his head, because reality was having a moment. And then came the chaos. Corners. Free kicks. Bodies flying. William Gomes doing his best impression of a battering ram. Suarez doing his best impression of a man whose bones are actively protesting his decisions. And all the while, that clock kept ticking up. 85, 86, 90. 7 minutes of added time, like a threat. Porto had the knife out. They were stabbing at the equalizer. Every block, every clearance from Inter Miami was like a desperate whisper into the wind. Not today. And when Ramos had to save that last-minute shot from Picault, a left-footed drive after a Messi header dropped like magic, it felt like the match gasped. Not just breathed. Gasped. Because it was over. Inter Miami didn't just survive the second half. They owned it. What makes a match like this stick isn't just the goals. It's the tension, the identity crisis both teams go through under the lights. Let's start with Porto. They came in like a side with plans. And for the first half, it was a masterclass in controlled aggression. Samu Agahawa was relentless, quick off the mark, cheeky on the ball, and the kind of nuisance that defenders pretend doesn't rattle them. Spoiler, it does. Rodrigo Mora? He looked like he was born to drift in space, constantly pulling strings from the half spaces. He faded later, but only because he'd been burning so brightly early on. But as a team, Porto lacked something crucial: adaptability. When Inter Miami changed the tempo in the second half, Porto kept trying to play the same song. And it's not that they didn't have the tools. Fabio Vieira had moments of inspiration, that classic drifting left foot sort of chaos. William Gomes, for all his chaos engine tendencies, was a willing runner and brought fire. But what they lacked was composure. They chased the game. And when you chase Messi, Suarez, Busquets, and company, you're not just running after players, you're running after ghosts of eras gone by. And they still know how to haunt you. Now, Inter Miami, they were two teams tonight. The one before halftime, a version of themselves that looked like they were trying to remember who they were. Disconnected lines, nervous build-up, a front line waiting for a pass that never came. But after halftime, it clicked. There's something weirdly poetic about watching a team rediscover itself during a match. The defensive line started stepping higher. Midfielders stopped panicking in transition. And when Segovia scored, it wasn't just an equalizer. It was a switch, a reveal. A reminder that this team wasn't just a celebrity sideshow with pastel kits. They were a team that could punch back. Even Suarez, whose first half was mostly heavy touches and fouls like he was trying to sabotage himself, found rhythm. He didn't score, but he carved space. Drew fouls, wasted time like a true professional. Even his grimace had intent. And the midfield, Redondo, Busquets, Segovia, they started playing chess. That is, until Busquets decided to turn it into a piano recital. Just little touches, composed beats, the kind of metronomic control that makes you wonder if time slows down for him. Credit to the defenders. Tomas Avilés and Noah Allen had a first half full of panic attacks, but grew into it. Allen, in particular, gave up the penalty early, but responded like someone who refused to let that define his night. By the end of the match, it was Inter Miami's shape, poise, and control that made Porto look panicked. You could see it in how Porto stopped trusting their own build-up, how they started launching long balls into the box like prayers. That wasn't fear, that was respect. Earned, not given. Now let's get personal. Let's talk about the souls on that pitch. The players who didn't just show up, but left something behind. Because in a match like this, where the result hangs on blades of grass and seconds of hesitation, it's the individual performances that truly echo. Lionel Messi. Let's get it over with, right? The free kick was pure cinema, a left-footed slice through reality, bending physics just enough to remind us we're watching a different species. But it wasn't just the goal. It was the shift in gravity. In the first half, he was drifting, floating in and out of the game like a half-finished thought. In the second half, he turned the match into a novella with his fingerprints on every page. The headed assist to Picault near the end, that's the kind of detail you miss if you blink. Who assists with their head at that angle, at that moment, in that chaos? Messi does. Because, of course, he does. Now, Segovia, wow. That goal wasn't just a moment. It was a statement. You don't roof that shot unless you believe the game owes you something. And he played like it did. Busy, feisty, technically sharp, and brave in the tightest spaces. His fingerprints were all over Miami's turnaround, and that goal might be the loudest he's ever shouted on a football pitch. Luis Suarez. Listen, it's not vintage Suarez. Let's not pretend we're in Barcelona, but there's still that something, that mean streak, that dark art of disruption. He wins fouls like a con man wins poker hands. Not always fair, but always effective. And when the team needed a villain to slow things down, draw contact, waste time, Suarez wore the black hat and smiled through the booze. Sergio Busquets, meanwhile, played like someone who knows he's smarter than you. If passes were thoughts, his were fully formed paragraphs. Did he cover every blade of grass? Absolutely not. He left some of that to the underlings. But when the tempo needed control, when the chaos needed choreography, Busquets brought the calm. He is the eye in the storm. Let's give Fafa Picault his flowers. Came on late, nearly scored, won fouls, broke up play. He didn't just play the last 10 minutes, he lived them. Everything about his cameo screamed urgency. On the other side, Samu Agahawa was Porto's heartbeat. He scored the penalty with that annoying confidence of someone who knew he'd buried it before he even struck it. But it was his movement after that impressed. Always available, always pestering. The mosquito at the Miami picnic. Rodrigo Mora had a strange one. First half, he was electric. Second half, he looked like a charger short on power. Maybe it was fatigue, maybe it was the adjustments Miami made. But the fade was real. And Claudio Ramos, the Porto keeper, saved what he could. Honestly, that last Messi to Picault chance, he kept his team in it when the match was trying to run away. But this wasn't about heroes and scapegoats. It was about responses. Who flinched, who adapted, who found a second wind. Miami had more answers. Porto had more questions. This has been Across the Pitch. Over and out.